Greetings, Father Mark signing on, continuing the course on the patristic period, Fathers of the Church, Christian Antiquity. Last time we concluded with the death of Pope Zephyrinus, the 15th Pope. So now we move into the reign of Pope number 16, Saint Callistus, Callistus, reigned from September 1st, 217 to October 14th, 222. We have met him before. He was in previous, actually as far back as Pope Victor. Callistus has the distinction of being the first pope to deal with an anti-pope. An anti-pope is a man elected as a rival to the true pope. There have been 39 anti-popes so far in church history. The first was another guy we've already met, Hippolytus, a Roman priest. We covered previously the author of the apostolic tradition. Hippolytus would maintain this schism through the reigns of two more popes, 18 years, before being reconciled with Pope St. Pontian in 235 AD. While, ironically, and you'll understand the irony soon enough, both of them had, like Callistus, been condemned. They were captured and refused to deny the faith, and were, of course, sentenced to death. But that death sentence was to be fulfilled ad Matala, to the mines of Sardinia, the same island where Callistus had previously been sentenced to work to death. Now, we don't know if it was the exact same mine, but because as we covered back then, Sardinia was a significant source of raw materials, mining raw materials in the empire. Callistus had obtained clemency, was one of those released as a result of a clemency obtained by Pope Victor from Marcia, who was a mistress to the Emperor Commodus. And Pope Zephyrinus ordained him a deacon, and then Callistus followed Zephyrinus as pope. As far as Hippolytus despised Callistus, he despised Zephyrinus too. He thought Zephyrinus was, I'll read you what Hippolytus said. This is in his Philosoemena, Book 9, Chapter 7. And Callistus, who was in the habit of always associating with Zephyrinus, and, as I have previously stated, of paying him hypocritical service, disclosed Zephyrinus to be a person able neither to form a judgment of things said, nor discerning the design of Callistus, who was accustomed to converse with Zephyrinus on topics which yielded satisfaction to the latter. Thus, after the death of Zephyrinus, supposing that he had obtained the position after which he so eagerly pursued, and then he goes on, then picking up the impostor Callistus, having ventured. Okay, I'll get to that. So Hippolytus regarded him as unsuitable to be pope. So Hippolytus had a group of supporters sufficient, to recognize him as pope and maintain yet another church in Rome, claiming to be Catholic. So we already have the Gnostic Church of the Valentinian variation, the Gnostic Church of the Marcionite variation. We have the Modalist Church, and we have the Patripassionist, who were modalists, but of a variation of modalism, and adoptionist, Theodotus of Byzantium. So 5 different churches, all claiming to be Christian, claiming to be the true church. Okay. He goes on and on about that. As Pope, now following up on his burial society scheme, which we covered in the reign of Zephyrinus, Callistus as Pope instituted a practice in Rome of the annual observance of a martyr's death at their tomb. And this is a practice which endures as our saints' feast days. And this is also the remote origin of the practice of altars in churches having relics of saints in the mensa, in the actual altar stone. So the mensas, however big the altar might be, they at least they used to. Now, they make them. But the traditional way as it evolved after legalization was that the mensa would be a separate removable square of stone or marble, and the relics would be in there, so that if the church got deconsecrated, and the altar was too big to move, then the mensa with the relics could be taken out and then moved to another altar if the original would be deconsecrated. So the remote origin of that is that in Callistus's time, when they have a memorial mass at the tomb of the martyr, they could actually say mass on the martyr's tomb, like on a sarcophagus. So the relics of the martyr were obviously in the tomb, because they were saying mass on the tomb. So that's the remote connection, the remote origin of that connection. Further, as Pope, Callistus decreed that the Church would recognize as valid marriages between persons of different social classes, even clandestine marriages between free and slave, although such marriages would not be recognized by Roman law. In the apostolic tradition, Hippolytus, by way of contrast, not only regarded such marriages as invalid, but he recommended that slaves be excluded from the church altogether, that they not even be baptized, on the grounds that a slave was not free to pledge to obey the moral law, and therefore was not free to enter into a marriage of exclusive fidelity. Because if the owner, decided to, commanded the slave to do something that would violate that fidelity, then the slave would have to obey or be killed. Now, Callistus, who recall, you rewatch the video on the reign of Pope Victor to refresh your memory, if needed, but Callistus had been a slave, and that was before he was ever captured as a Christian. He had been a slave, so obviously he regarded things very differently. He felt that it was unjust to exclude slaves for things that were beyond their control. So if indeed a married Christian slave was ordered to engage in activities that were adulterous, then that slave was not guilty of adultery morally, because the consent was absent, but rather was the victim of a rape. So for this, the antipope Hippolytus denounced Callistus as posturing to be a new Moses, bestowing the 9 commandments, deleting the commandment against adultery, which is actually not what Callistus did. So let's see. And Hippolytus records his argument for us. Let's see. This is from the Philosoimena, Book 9, Chapter 7. Quote, "And in justification, he, Callistus, alleges that what has been spoken by the apostle has been declared in reference to such persons. Who are you that judges another man's servant?" He asserted that likewise the parable of the tares, the wheat and the tares, the wheat and the weeds, is uttered in reference to this. Let the weeds grow along with the wheat. Or, in other words, let those in the church who are guilty of sin remain in it. All right. And there's an seminarians, if you're, I don't know where you are in your canon law, if you've, let's see, your first, so no, you probably haven't done the canon law of marriage yet, but if you're interested in this, there's an article in the Studia Patristica titled The Edict of Callistus. The author is C. The first, they just do the initials. This person just did initials. C period B period Daly, D-A-L-Y. And the Studia Patristica, it's the third, it was a quarterly, so this is the third installment in 1961, pages 176 through 182. Callistus further enraged Hippolytus by forgiving priests, bishops, and deacons who had fallen into serious sin but later repented. Even worse, in the estimation of Hippolytus, is Callistus allowed them to resume their functions, arguing that Jesus forgave the apostles for abandoning him at the time of his arrest, and forgave St. Peter, who did actually deny. Not only did he run away, but subsequent to that, as we read every Good Friday, Peter actually denied Jesus 3 times, and yet Jesus forgave him. And and Peter was able to spent the rest of his life, serving the faith until he was martyred for it. And so Callistus's reasoning is that answers it. I mean, that's definitive, that no Christian could presume to do less. Another, let's see, I think I have a quote there. Yeah, this also in Hippolytus and the Philosophemena, the Refutation, Book 9, Chapter 7, is where he talks about that. In this case, he was about forgiving, a quote, this is about the time of this man, Callistus, bishops, priests, and deacons who had been twice married or thrice married began to be allowed to retain their place among the clergy. If also, however, anyone who was in holy orders should become married, Callistus permitted such a one to continue in holy orders as if he had not sinned. So Hippolytus didn't like that. All right, another father of the church that we've already met was Origen of Alexandria, and he continued his work into his life overlapped with Callistus's as well. In the year 220, Origen began his first monumental work of Christian scholarship. And in Greek, the title is the Periarchon. And that's transliterated as P-E-R-I. Then the second archon, A-R-C-H-O-N. So it doesn't translate easily into English. So peri, like perimeter, and archon, like monarch, arc, So the peri means around, like perimeter, and archon is rule, is some type of rule. So the periarchon literally means rules around. So that doesn't sound right in English. So conventionally, it's the title is translated either as fundamental doctrines or as the principles. Origen intended it to be a manual, a summary manual of Christian theology, like a summa. He worked on it for 10 years, producing 4 books. The original Greek text, which is what he wrote it in Greek. The original Greek text is lost. So subsequent controversy about Origen, at least this we've already seen the thing about the voluntary orchiectomy earlier, and as well as other things, but the subsequent controversy, doctrinal controversy about this work is based on the Latin translation rendered by Rufinus of Aquileia, who was a one-time friend of St. Jerome, and they ended up being bitter enemies. It was really sad. And 3 centuries after Origen's death, so Origen died in 253 A.D., so it's 300 years later, literally, in 553 A.D., the Fifth Ecumenical Council, which was the Second Council of Constantinople, extracted 15 propositions from the Periarchon and condemned them as heretical. So, and we'll get to that in the medieval course. Yeah, there's no way we'll get that far in this course. So back to the reign of Callistus. The Emperor Caracalla, as we saw last time, was assassinated in the same year that Pope Callistus was elected, 217 A.D. He was followed by the Praetorian prefect who had orchestrated his assassination. He became the 26th emperor, the Emperor Macrinus, or Macrinus. It's Macrinus. Reigned from 217 to 218. The reason his reign was so brief brings us back to the family of Septimius Severus. Julia Maesa, that's Maesa, was sister of the second wife of Septimius Severus. His second wife was Julia Domna, Domna. So Julia Maesa decided to play empire against Macrinus with her 2 grandsons. Now, these were children of 2 different daughters. And all these women are named Julia. That's it's just one of those things. So Julia Maesa secured the assassination of Emperor 26, Macrinus, and bribed an ambitious officer of the Praetorian Guard into having the guard proclaim her eldest grandson as emperor. Right. So this is Emperor Elagabalus, Elagabalus. So recall the family. Severus's second wife, Julia Domna, was the daughter of a Canaanite, a pagan priest, in the cult of the Phoenician sun god Elagabal. So this guy was named for that. So she and her daughter, the emperor's mother, governed the empire, while the new Caesar, Elagabalus was born in the year 204. He became emperor in the year 218. So, if you've been following, from the beginning, you know what's going to happen. It's the curse, the imperial curse of all those who became emperor before the age of 30. They went irretrievably insane. And this kid was 14 years old. He began disgracing his office. He started wearing makeup, dressing in clothing that traditional Romans would regard as effeminate. He began wearing female jewelry, perfuming his swimming pool with rose petals, and engaged in, shall we say, escapades of behavior, of depravity, moral depravity, not seen since, well, I shouldn't say since Caligula, because we've had a few other nut jobs in there. So when his grandmother, Elagabalus's grandmother, Julia Misa, she, the Roman Empire is a, as we've seen, started as a dominance, a predatory dominance hierarchy. And one cannot lead a predatory dominance hierarchy acting like this guy was acting. So she knew he was going to be killed soon enough, so she decided to get ahead of the curve. And Julia Misa had Elagabalus and Elagabalus's mother, who was Julia Misa's own daughter, murdered. And then followed by her other grandson, who was the son of another daughter, also named Julia. And so this next emperor became the emperor. Of course, he had 6 names like all these people, but he's best known as the Emperor Severus Alexander, or Alexander Severus, or just Alexander. And we'll say this happened in 222, which is the same year that Callistus was martyred. So we'll pick up with this guy next time. Pope Callistus was murdered on October 14th, 222. He was ambushed by an anti-Christian mob in Trastevere, what is now the neighborhood of Trastevere. That's on the western side of the Tiber River, on the same side of the river as the Vatican, but south of the Vatican. Let's see. According to the LP, the Liber Pontificalis, he held 5 ordinations in the month of December. But again, as the LP, it doesn't tell us, were they all in one December, or we're sequential Septembers. But anyway, it says he ordained 9 priests, 4 deacons, and 8 bishops. So continuing the apostolic succession. His remains were interred in the cemetery of Callipudius on the Via Aurelia. Okay, so we'll stop there. And the next we'll pick up next time with Pope 17, Saint Urban or Urbanus, Urban I. So for the moment, thank you for your attention. This session is adjourned.